Assalamu alaikum, a very good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to yet another episode of Perceptive Learning Zone. And my name is Mentor Hamza Nasser, and today's topic is the exit of multinational companies and FMCGs from Pakistan. So, as we know, Pakistan's economy it faces mounting pressure as a growing number of multinational corporations they have announced their withdrawal from the country. Now, they have cited unsustainable operating conditions. And this corporate retreat now, it coincides with critical negotiations with the IMF, known as the International Monetary Fund, for a $7 billion bailout program, which underscores the nation's volatile and precarious fiscal position. Now, if we look at it year-wise, from 2022 to mid-2025, Pakistan has witnessed a concerning trend. There has been the steady withdrawal of at least 13 major international companies across key sectors. We're talking about technology, ride hailing, telecom, energy, as well as pharmaceuticals. Now, this corporate exodus, it is not just a reflection of tough business cycles, but it signals, my dear viewers, it signals a deeper malaise in the country's economic as well as regulatory environment. Now, let's understand how this crisis has deepened. So, if you talk about Microsoft, which is one of the world's most iconic tech firms, it closed its operation in Pakistan in July 2025 after 25 years. And it has retained only a liaison office with a handful of staff. And this decision was driven by global restructuring, but also by local challenges. What sort of local challenges? We're talking about policy inconsistency, foreign exchange restrictions, as well as rising operational costs. Also, ladies and gentlemen, you talk about Careem. Careem, being a subsidiary of Uber, it suspended its ride hailing services on 18 July 2025, citing a harsh economic climate, citing low investor confidence, talking about the shrinking consumer demand. Uber itself had already exited in 2022 for similar reasons. Also, you talk about Gillette Pakistan, a P&G Procter and Gamble subsidiary, which reported revenues nearly halving to 1.5 billion rupees in the fiscal year ending in June 2025. Also, Telenor, the Norwegian telecom giant, it sold its entire Pakistani business to PTCL in December 2023 after struggling with rising energy costs, heavy taxations, as well as regulatory hurdles. Also, in the energy sector, Shell Pakistan, it divested its 77% stake in mid 2023, citing foreign exchange issues as well as supply chain challenges. And also, if you talk about Total Energies, they also exited. They sold their 50% stake in Total Parco in 2024 due to declining profitability as well as unfavorable regulation. And also, the pharmaceutical sector, fellas, it has been hit particularly hard. You have Eli Lilly, you have Sanofi, you have Bayer, you have Pfizer, which have all reduced or ended their operations in this country between 2022 and 2024. And they've cited unsustainable margins driven by import dependencies, currency volatility, as well as delayed regulatory approvals. Now, Fresenius Kabi, a major German healthcare company, they also discontinued their operations in early 2023 due to business climate concerns. And in the retail energy space, Puma Energy has withdrawn from the Ardmore gas joint venture in early 2022, marking another foreign pullback. Even global industrial names like GE as well as ExxonMobil, they have scaled back their presence in Pakistan in the face of prolonged macroeconomic uncertainty. So, how does this bode how does this weigh as far as the cumulative impact on Pakistan's economic landscape is concerned? So, ladies and gentlemen, this wave of exits is not just symbolic. It has had measurable effects on Pakistan's economic landscape. Net foreign direct investment, it stood at 1.86 billion US dollars in the fiscal year 2021, and it has declined to 1.47 billion US dollars in fiscal year 2024. And this is reflecting reduced investor confidence. And while Pakistan's trade deficit has narrowed to 24.09 billion in the fiscal year 2024, this was largely due to import compression rather than export growth. And foreign exchange reserves that were held by the state bank, now they improved marginally, reaching 14.5 billion US dollars by mid 2025, bolstered by the IMF inflows as well as rollovers from friendly countries. However, at the same time, if we talk about the technology sector remains massively under strain. The startup funding, it peaked at 366 million US dollars in 2021. It plummeted to under 50 million US dollars in 2024. As global capital flows have dried up, the domestic instability has worsened. The brain drain in tech has escalated. There have been anecdotal estimates that have suggested thousands of skilled workers leaving Pakistan and relocating abroad. Retention rates among computer science graduates, they have sharply fallen as many seek opportunities overseas, contributing to a growing vacuum in Pakistan's digital economy. Now, these departures, they are rippling across every layer of the economy. They are resulting, cumulatively speaking, fellows, they're resulting in the loss of high-paying jobs, in the loss of access to global supply chains, as well as the loss of access to critical knowledge transfer. They are impacting consumer welfare. The market competition is shrinking. Prices are rising. Most critically, they are damaging Pakistan's credibility as an investment destination, particularly in the digital as well as the innovation sector. So, a key factor is the significant decline in manufacturing, with many sectors reporting production drops of over 10% annually. This exodus is linked to ongoing issues such as high sovereign risks. You have a regressive tax regime and a shift in global trade dynamics, which are favoring lower cost producers like China, making local production highly more uncompetitive, right? So, what actually is the root cause behind all of this? Yes, how do we go about it? So the analysts now, they are attributing these exits to a confluence of structural issues plaguing Pakistan's business environment. The Pakistani rupee's depreciation, it has inflated the import costs and eroded profit margins, while inconsistent taxation policies and regulatory complexities, they have significantly deterred long-term investments. Now, political instability and security concerns, they further compound the challenges. They create an atmosphere of unpredictability that global firms can ill afford. Foreign direct investment, it has plummeted, exacerbating unemployment as well as straining local supply chains. The loss of these companies now, it threatens thousands of jobs, and it could inflate prices for consumer goods from personal care products to pharmaceuticals, hitting low income households the hardest. Now, Pakistan's economy, it has shifted towards being consumption oriented. This has led to a stagnant growth. This has led to a stagnant gross domestic product, heavily reliant on imports. Now, this reliance, what it does is it hampers domestic investment as well as economic growth, as the investment to GDP ratio, it remains low compared to regional averages. The high cost of formal business operations, due to taxes and compliance, it further discourages MNCs, who often find it easier to revert to distribution models rather than remanufacturing. Moreover, fellows, the deteriorating real incomes, exacerbated by inflation and high living costs, they have reduced the consumer demand for MNC products. A thriving gray market for smuggled goods, it significantly undermines formal businesses, while government practices such as price fixing, they contribute to an uncompetitive environment. So, what is the future? Is IMF coming to the rescue once again? So, as these developments unfold, as we speak right now, ladies and gentlemen, Pakistan is engaged in tense talks with the International Monetary Fund over the second review of its $7 billion extended fund facility that was approved in September 2024. Now, Negotiations, which began earlier this month, they focus on three things. Especially they focus on revenue mobilization, they focus on fiscal sustainability, as well as structural reform. So the IMF has expressed flexibility on certain concessions, particularly in light of the recent flood related the losses, but it has raised concerns over discrepancies in Pakistan's external debt data that is totaling 11 billion US dollars for fiscal years 2023 to 2024 and 2024 to 2025. So these inconsistencies now, they have prompted demands for greater transparency to ensure the program's credibility. And despite some slippages, I would say, despite some slippages in reform implementation, Islamabad anticipates securing a new tranche by early November, pending the IMF Executive Board approval, obviously. The government plans to brief the IMF on a new tariff policy framework that is aimed at bolstering the energy sector viability. However, the critics they argue that without addressing root causes like currency volatility, like bureaucratic inefficiencies, such infusions may only provide temporary relief at best. So we're talking about an interplay between corporate flight as well as IMF dependency, which is highlighting Pakistan's deepening economic vulnerabilities. And with GDP growth projected at a modest 2.5% for 2025 and inflation lingering above 10%, the stake could not be higher. Successful negotiations, they could possibly stabilize reserves and restore some investor confidence, but failure risks further isolation. For Pakistan, balancing immediate fiscal needs with long term structural changes, this remains the core challenge. The international community, including bilateral lenders, they watch closely, aware that sustained support it hinges on demonstrable progress. So, what is the positive side of the spectrum? So, if any, so in the service sector, the exits also reflect broader, what should I say, global restructuring rather than a loss of investor confidence, right? Shell's sale of its Pakistan operations to Saudi-based Wafi Energy, it aligns with its strategy to exit retail fuel businesses in several countries. Telenor's decision is part of a move to focus on a smaller set of core markets, and Uber and Careem, they've yielded market share to more affordable competitors such as InDrive and Yango. So as some long entrenched firms are leaving, new players are moving in, drawn by signs of economic recovery and growth. And China's Challenge Group is investing 150 million US dollars in Punjab to develop a high-tech textile zone that is expected to generate 18,000 jobs and an estimated 100 million US dollars in apparel exports. Also, the consumer healthcare multinational company called Halion, it is expanding its Jamshoro facility, positioning Pakistan as a regional manufacturing hub and targeting a sizable part of production for export. Belarus, it plans to set up a tractor manufacturing joint venture in Balochistan. Also, if you talk about the financial sector, the sale of First Women Bank Limited, it marks the first successful privatization in 2 decades. So, though it is a small transaction, the acquisition by multi-billion UAE investment holding company, it signals growing interest. It signals growing investor interest as it explores more opportunities in Pakistan. Also, the UAE's Mashreq Bank, it is also investing 100 million US dollars, aiming to expand financial access for the unbanked and establish Pakistan as a back office hub for its global operations. Also, the largest new wave of investment is expected from China as both countries they resume work on the long delayed second phase of this China Pakistan economic corridor. New investments amounting to 8.5 billion US dollars, including 1.5 billion US dollars in joint ventures, they have recently been finalized, targeting key sectors such as agriculture, renewable energy, electric vehicles, healthcare, steel, as well as other emerging industries. So it is essential that these new investments they do not repeat the old import substitution model pursued by many existing companies. Instead, they should emulate the example of the Chinese Pakistan joint venture. Service Long March Tires, SLM Tires in short, which has successfully captured most of the domestic market once dominated by smuggled goods and is now exporting tires worth 100 million US dollars annually, mostly to the United States. Now, the real challenge for policymakers is to identify and replicate such success stories. Pakistan, it hosts over 200 multinational companies that play a vital role in driving commerce and industry and contribute more than one third of the FBR's total tax collection. Yet, despite the significant presence, their export footprint, it remains negligible, and even as they repatriate over 1.5 billion US dollars in profits annually. So in contrast, multinationals operating in other developing countries are far more outward looking. They are more focused on global markets, they are earning substantial foreign exchange, and they're contributing to export growth rather than relying primarily on domestic sales. So well, ultimately, I would say that this is going to be the real challenge. And the solution is that in order to reverse this trend, Pakistan must urgently pursue structural reform. This includes currency destabilization, consistent regulatory policies, and a long term strategy for digital as well as industrial development. So, without serious and sustained intervention, more exits may follow, and with them, the hope of building a competitive, knowledge based economy may remain just out of reach for this country. So policymakers, they need to focus more on creating an enabling environment for domestic as well as foreign investors rather than being fixated on foreign direct investment alone. And a comprehensive reform strategy acknowledging market dynamics is essential for revitalizing the economic landscape and preventing further MNC exits. Price controls and rigid regulations have made it harder for global firms to operate profitably, while local players have grown stronger, more agile, and more competitive. So, price controls and rigid regulations, right, have made it harder for global firms to operate profitably. So, we have to look into this as well. And also, when I look at this scenario, this current exodus of MNCs and FMCGs from Pakistan, it does remind me of some historical precedents as well. So, South Korea in the 1960s, they abandoned import substitution and they aggressively backed export driven manufacturing, transforming from a war torn economy into a global industrial power. Perhaps we could copy them. Taiwan's economic miracle, it stemmed from shifting SMEs towards global markets, encouraged by stable policies and strict performance-based incentives. Perhaps we can take a leaf out of their book, right? Talking about the third historical precedent, China's rise after 1978, when Deng Xiaoping, he opened the economy, prioritized the exports, as well as foreign partnerships over protectionist state industries. Perhaps we can take a leaf out of their book as well. Okay, you could take a leaf out of the book of the Vietnam's Dartmouth reforms in the 1980s, which moved the country away from central planning to export-oriented manufacturing, turning it into a leading electronics as well as textile exporter. Also, we can follow the example of Malaysia and Singapore, which have transitioned from labor-intensive assemblies to high-tech export hubs by eliminating excessive productions and embracing global competition, right? It reminds me of that saying of Deng Xiaoping, right? When he says that it doesn't matter whether a cat is black or white as long as it catches mice. This is a reminder that results and competitiveness, they matter more than rigid or protected economic models. Similarly, Lee Kuan Yew once said that if you are afraid of failure, you will not succeed. The best angle from which to approach any problem is the triangle, right? Economies must take bold reform steps. They must reduce protectionism and embrace competition in order to grow. So, in conclusion, to summarize our entire discussion, the recent reforms to Pakistan's trade and tariff policies, they offer an opportunity to shift towards export-led growth, and multinationals can and should play a central role in that transition as they have elsewhere. The era of special concessions through SROs and high tariff protection is drawing to a close, and companies can no longer afford to depend on importing components at low duties, assembling them, and selling locally at high margins in a highly protected market. To remain relevant and, more importantly, in order to remain competitive, they must break this vicious cycle of dependency and embrace an export export-oriented strategy, one that rewards efficiency, rewards innovation, but more importantly, rewards, incentivizes global competitiveness. And this is precisely how the East Asian economies transformed their industrial landscapes and achieved lasting prosperity. And by following similar policies, hopefully Pakistan can do the same as well, God willing. All right, fellas, that'll be all for now. Thank you very much for your time. You've been a lovely audience as always. Please don't hesitate to like, share, and subscribe. I will be back with much more illuminating content. Thank you very much and stay blessed. Assalamu alaikum.